Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sarah Dominguez. I work with the Office of Advising Strategies at the University of New Mexico Albuquerque main campus, and I'm the Transfer Pathways Officer and Dual Credit Program Supervisor. And today I'm here to talk to you about supporting our transfer student population. So just a few things to keep in mind for this presentation. So first of all, there's many different aspects of transfer and definitions of transfer. So, of course, we've got students who transfer from 2-year to 4-year, 4-year to 4-year, 4-year to 2-year, some that swirl between all of the above. So, but for today's purposes, what I'm really only going to be talking about is vertical transfer. So those students who are transitioning from a 2-year institution to a 4-year institution. And we'll be talking about some of the challenges that they may face and what you can do either as a high school counselor or a teacher or a college university advisor to help support those students. And I would also like to preface that what I'm doing today is a really quick overview. Transfer runs really deep, and in a 20-minute period, I can really just barely scratch the surface. So, we're really only going over just a small piece of what's really going on with transfer right now. And we're really not going to delve too far into things like, institutional reform, state reform, not too heavy into faculty advisement, and then partnerships between institutions. I kind of took it from the perspective of what we can be doing here in our own offices to help students individually. So first, trying to understand why this is important to talk about kind of stems from some national data that we have on transfer students. So some of you may have seen this before and are very familiar with it because it's pretty widely shared in the transfer community. But what nationally we found is that 80% of students that attend community colleges, we do know that they want to earn a bachelor's degree. But out of that 80%, only 31% do successfully transfer to a 4-year institution. And then out of that 31%, only 14% end up earning their bachelor's degree within a 6-year period. And on top of that, these outcomes are disproportionately impact our Black, Hispanic, and lower income students. So this is why, transfer has become such a big topic because it is touching the lives of many students and there's room for improvement, and we're looking for ways to collectively do that. So for today, I'm going to talk about 6 different key areas under which we can support transfer students. And I kind of pulled a lot of this information from different presentations I've attended in the past, ones I've created in the past, ones that I've created in conjunction with people in this room like Danielle Berrien. So, we're really just kind of trying to pull some of this information in together to kind of help fit the needs of this ECHO session. So the first area that I want to go over is dual credit and high school discussions. And, some of you may be thinking, well, isn't this a transfer presentation? Why are we talking about high school? But really, some of these transfer issues can be addressed, and we can start preparing to alleviate some transfer issues down the road at the time that students are in high school. And, 2 of the ways we can do this is one, through the dual credit programs that students are participating in, but also just through general high school discussions and conversations about pathways beyond high school. So some of the challenges we see in particular with dual credit programs as it relates to transfer is that, when students are doing a dual credit program, they're really just thinking in the moment and rather than the long term. In order for me to graduate from high school, one of my requirements is that I do AP honors or dual credit. So I'm picking dual credit, and they're doing it so that they can earn meet their graduation requirements. Sometimes there's a lack of intentional course selection, and they're not really choosing them in such a way that they account toward both high school credit and higher education credit. They may be told by a high school, well, you need to be picking this and this because that's what we need for high school. So they say, okay. They look at the agreement list that their high school has with the college. It's on the approved list. Win-win. They just take a class. And then there's also this, question of, are these dual credit courses that are being taken, are they simply, going to count for college credit? Like they're transferable, or is there meaning behind it? Are they actually going to be applicable to the degree program that they intend to earn someday? And so these are all the reasons why, dual credit truly is a transfer issue, because, even though it's being taken in high school, there's potential for it to transition or transfer into a 2-year program and then potentially into a 4-year program later. But right now, there seems to be a disconnect in making that long-term plan and starting at the end and working backward to kind of plan to that moment in time in high school when they're making that decision about dual credit courses. So what can we do to support students in this area? So I think one of the first ways is while students are in high school, we really need to give this, um, present the facts about what the different pathways are in an unbiased fashion, really giving the student the agency to choose what their pathway is going to look like. And I know high schools are really working very hard to do this through, different things that they're doing right now with students. So, this is really kind of something that's already in progress. They are having those career conversations with them. But I think what we need to do is kind of shift that to also including some transfer minded discussions so that if a student does say, I really would rather go to this 2-year institution first, and I don't know what I want to do after that, having that kind of conversation. Well, if it's going to be a 4-year, we really want to start, thinking about what's going on at the 4-year so we can plan for the 2 years so we can plan for now. Also, I think having a good liaison list with college and university advisement centers is a good idea. And I think high schools have a pretty good relationship with recruiters from colleges, but the recruitment piece of going to college helps students understand how to get in, but it doesn't necessarily help them for how to plan. And this doesn't even necessarily have to be for dual credit students. There's also other students who might be taking AP or making other decisions about elective credits or even what sort of career pathway they might want to take, where it may be helpful to talk with an academic advisor before they've start making those decisions in high school that affect what's going on their freshman year in college and beyond. And then in particular with dual credit forms, I think, having this idea of, when you are signing off on a dual credit form as a high school representative, that you've really made sure that the student has talked through with somebody from the intended degree program that they plan to go into at the college that they intend to go to really make sure that they're not just picking something from a list simply because it's approved or simply because it fits their high school college schedule, so that there's just some real intention behind those courses that they're taking. So a second area that we can support transfer in is in transfer knowledge and capacity. So some of the challenges here is students still have have this unsure understanding of the transfer process. How does it work? When should I be looking at it? What do I need to do? Who is it that I can contact for help with this? Um, and then there's also the concept that students, who are transfer students, they certainly are college savvy. We know this because they've successfully completed time in one college setting and have been able to get admitted into the next phase of their college career. But what they aren't savvy in is what's going on at that receiving institution that they're going to. Students may also lack guidance on what courses to take on an individual level. There's plenty of information out there on the internet about, 4-year degree plans, 2+2 programs, things like that. But those are, built on generalities and, one perfect schedule or plan that doesn't fit all. And so if you're not getting this individual plan, when you're transferring, it can be really impeding. Another thing is, transfer students, they don't know what they don't know until it's a hard lesson learned. And we're really trying to avoid those types of situations. And also, I think one of these knowledge gaps that we have is really knowing what their options and opportunities for transfer and at their transfer institution are prior to transfer. So ways we can support in this area. First and foremost, when a student's with you in your office, you really want to make sure that you're making them feel welcome when they meet with you. Not only so that they feel confident in being able to ask questions, but also feeling confident in the answers you give them. It's a trust piece. You want to make you're truly understanding the process yourself so that when you do instruct students on what they need to do when they come to you for help, you're not continuing a chain of misinformation, and we're guiding them properly. We also want to read between the lines. So sometimes students don't know how to ask a question or even that they need to. So we really want to go beyond just simply answering the one question that a student comes into your office with. Probe the student. We know what sort of pitfalls they might fall into. So if we start kind of guiding those conversations beyond what they initially came in for, we may be able to help them avoid some pitfalls. We also want to, not assume they already know everything, but at the same time, respect their existing knowledge. So it's kind of this fine line that we're running with transfer students where we're not treating them like freshmen, even though they may be feeling like a freshman all over again with a new culture at their transfer institution, a new set of deadlines and dates, a new way of processing things. Nomenclature could be different at a new institution. So there's really walking that fine line of, treating a transfer student like a freshman and just acknowledging that they may feel like one and helping to navigate them through that. And again, we really want to start, presenting facts in an unbiased fashion so that we can give students the agency to choose. So an example like this in the transfer world would be, if you have, a student in your office who says, I want to do engineering. What's the best school for me to go to? Rather than answering with your opinion about which school you think that they should transfer to, you really just want to give them the facts about where there is availability for engineering programs and help them to understand what their choices are so that they have the freedom to choose rather than saying, well, I really think UNM's got the best engineering program, so that's where you should go, because then we're kind of robbing them of that agency to choose. So third thing is early and frequent transfer advisement. So one of the tricky things about this and what makes it a challenge is sometimes we just don't know who's out there that's wanting to transfer. And, these are students who may want to transfer next semester or 2 years from now or 3 years from now if they're a part-time student. So, just trying to identify these students can be a challenge. The consistency of information shared between institutions on program requirements, and especially this can get tricky for community colleges if, several different four-year institutions that they work with have different policies and procedures for transfer, trying to keep track of all of that. And also when it comes to, especially for advisors, having this, set of students that you're responsible for because they're degree seeking at your institution, trying to balance that with the work that you need to do for prospective students, for future students, and for those students who are going to be exiting your institution without earning a degree. How do you balance making sure that you're giving proper attention to all three types of students? And also, there's a challenge in trying to break existing ideas of when the transfer conversation should start, who it should be done with, and with what modality. So how can we support students here? From the four-year front, it takes a little bit of extra effort, but as you meet with prospective or future students, transfer students that you meet with, if you keep a list of them and keep a running list, you can reach out to them every semester just as a check-in to see if they need any help, if they still need help planning, let them know that they're more than welcome to come back and talk with you. From the two-year side, asking each and every student that comes through the door, are you thinking of transferring someday? If so, today's the day to start planning, because there is no magic number of credit hours where it's a good idea to start having that conversation. There's a myth out there that, really maybe after about 30 credit hours is when you should start thinking about what you need to do for transfer. And sometimes that's just too late. 30 hours ago could have been, the wrong 30 hours, or, it could be that, there's other things that needed to be planned for and thought about in that year or more if they're part-time that, could have been missed out on if we weren't having that conversation early. And we also want to help plan for future challenges that they may run into. One of which being that, they get to their receiving institution and realize their major's the wrong fit. And this could very well happen, especially if they're thinking of transferring into something that is a program that doesn't exist at their two-year, and they don't really find out details about it until they get there. So again, some early planning, early connections. Also, there's always the issue of credit loss. So taking courses at the sending institution that are transferable, but not going to be applicable to the attended degree program. And this is especially important because there's a lot of transfer research out there that says that, students who have more credit hours that are applied, more transfer credit hours that are applied to the degrees that they're earning, or have a much higher likelihood of graduating and graduating in a quicker amount of time. So this is a big deal. And then another thing is just learning about opportunities after it's too late. Another piece of research that is out there is that students who earn their associate degrees are also more likely to finish up their bachelor's degrees. And part of the reason in doing so is, they find that a lot of their credits are more applicable. And when that happens, that could mean that you really only have 2 years left once you get to the 4-year. And if it takes you that first year to get familiar with your transfer institution and learn about undergraduate research opportunities, internships, study abroad, that leaves you 1 year to try to get all that done. And it's just not enough time and transfer students lose out at those opportunities. So, the goal with early and frequent transfer advisement is that those opportunities would be known ahead of time so that when they do transfer, they can hit the ground running with those types of opportunities. It's important to encourage semesterly one-on-one advisement, even though it's not mandatory, but is especially important for somebody who thinks they might be transferring someday. And at the four-year institution, doing a first semester check-in with our transfer students, especially around deadline dates as they're transitioning and getting used to the changes in those areas. And also this concept of respecting knowledge boundaries and knowing when it's appropriate or in the student's best interest to make a warm referral instead of trying to help the student self-advise with information that can be found on a website. So the fourth thing here is that financial adjustment and planning. So there can be a pretty big sticker shock of four-year tuition when compared to a two-year institution. There's different deadlines for FAFSA, different priority deadlines for FAFSA from institution to institution. And so a challenge for transfer students is, missing that deadline, especially if they're the receiving institution has a much earlier a deadline than the sending institution. Not knowing how or where to look for scholarship opportunities, not really being able to tie together all the pieces, and finding ways to manage the cost when you happen to be a student that's not going to get financial aid and is not going to get a scholarship. What do you do next? How do you manage that sticker shock of tuition cost? So what we can do here is, again, starting this conversation early so that it's not a surprise when the student actually transfers, and being transparent about what the cost really is going to be, not sugarcoating it, but being realistic about what it really is going to look like. Also balancing this idea of being hands-off, but also respecting boundaries. So, a lot of times you might hear people say, well, I'm an advisor, financial aid should be taking care of it, financial aid. So, hands off, I can't answer your questions about that. You need to go over there. I can't help you here. Trying to balance that extreme with the other extreme of trying to answer questions that you're really not prepared or trained to answer. And a way to avoid that is really trying to get to know your campus experts in building on those relationships. So I put integrated advisement here. That's what we call it at UNM, but I'm sure every campus has a version of this. It's, a type of advisement where the advisement there that's offered is a little bit more holistic, and they are trained and prepared to talk about financial aid. Some campuses may have some sort of center for financial capability or workshops on it. And then, of course, your standard financial aid office. Also, what's helpful is minimizing or eliminating cold referrals. So instead of putting it on the student, here's the number to financial aid, go call them. Here's the website for scholarships, go look at them, really kind of getting them in touch directly with somebody who can help them is a more useful approach or effective. And then fifth, kind of looking at advisement culture and sense of belonging. So we really one of the challenges here with working with transfer students is this notion of my student and your student, and where and when they are mine and yours, and really shifting it to a shared model where the student is our student at all times. Kind of getting over this fear of poaching when we are doing early outreach or advisement. looking at the disparity between the information that freshmen get and transfer students get when they're new to institution, and how welcome they feel when they get there. Having difficulty finding community and finding other transfers to connect with when they do arrive at a new institution. Transfer students not really feeling part of campus traditions because they haven't been on campus since they were a freshman. And finding ways to be involved as a non-traditional student, because a lot of our transfer students do happen to fall in the non-traditional student category. So what can we do to support these students in this area? We really want to work as a team to support students between institutions. So kind of think of this through a three-way advising model. So if we've got, your sending institution advisor in touch with the receiving institution advisor in a Zoom room with a student who needs help, and together the three of you tackling this process together and making a game plan together so that we're working on the needs of the associate degree program in conjunction with the bachelor's degree program, and having the student there in the room with both advisors could be really, transformative and a good way for the student to really kind of get a similar story, and there's not a back and forth between, well, go ask your 4-year, well, go back and ask your 2-year. We can just have a one conversation. Understanding and trusting the difference between trying to poach a student and really just trying to do some early outreach to the benefit of the student. So, some of, I think, the idea of waiting till 30 credit hours or waiting till 45 credit hours before, a student gets approached about transfer work also sometimes can stem from that fear of, a 4-year institution approaching because they're trying to get them to transfer early or take them away. When really, from an advisement perspective, we're just trying to get in there to make sure that, courses that are being selected are beneficial to both programs. Also, sharing your own transfer story, if you've got one, can be really beneficial here in helping to identify with the student and have an empathetic conversation about transfer. And if that's not possible, being able to share stories of transfer students who are currently at your institution or have graduated from your institution. This concept, if, they can do it, so can I. Encouraging participation. So getting to know your faculty members, joining different groups on campus, different ethnic centers on campus, getting involved with research, undergraduate research, or internships opportunities. The more that you can encourage a student to get involved, the more we can help with their sense of belonging. As an advisor, you could even start to facilitate study groups for new transfers that happen to be in the same course together and just may not know it. And also, something we started doing here at UNM for the first time last year is to celebrate National Transfer Student Week on your campus. This year, it's going to be October 16th through the 20th. And there's more information on the website that I have listed here if you want to learn more about it and or how to get started. Let's see here. Cutting close to my time here, so I'm trying to move quickly. So the last thing here is moving beyond the transactional and into the transformational. And so, this section is kind of looking at a little bit beyond what we can do in our individual offices. But the concept here is really kind of moving beyond these transactional documents alone that we have traditionally used to try to help facilitate transfer students, and uses tools to help make this transfer process seamless. So examples of this are transfer articulation agreements and 2+2 degree plans. Not proposing here that these are unimportant and need to go away or aren't working. They are critical. You need your transfer articulation agreements to, communicate between institutions about admission requirements and how one course transfers from one institution to another. 2+2 degree plans, I find to be pretty limiting. They're, created in a linear fashion where it's a chem degree to a chem degree, English degree to an English degree. And, a lot of what we're seeing is, there's very few students who follow that trajectory exactly. So you need something more flexible, and that meets students where they are. So, the other thing is to use these transactional documents more as a foundational piece so that we can get to the transformational through high touch point transfer centered programs. So on the way to doing this, what we really need to do is really get to know our transfer population. Who are they? What are their barriers and needs? Because this is going to vary from institution to institution. There's national data on this, but that data may or may not be exactly in line with what's going on at your institution. We really want to focus in on data-driven decision making when we're thinking about what programs to offer. We want this based on, quantitative data. It's good to have the numbers, but also the qualitative data. We need to hear from students. We need to hear from staff. We need to hear from faculty. And in doing that kind of qualitative data, do a comparison between, certain areas of transfer. How are students feeling that we're doing in comparison to how staff and faculty feel that we're doing? Is there a disparity between the opinion of how well or not well a certain area is going, and how can we get them to align better? Re-envisioning the use, look, and feel of those transactional pieces so that we do keep them around and use them as a foundation. Also teach that a transformational piece, folding in programming, individual advisement, mentoring, other means of supporting a sense of belonging, so that we can really transform the transfer experience altogether. So kind of looking at this future of transfer and what's going on for statewide movements. So I'm kind of shifting to a new piece here because I really feel that there's a lot of boots on the ground folks who don't always hear about what's going on in higher level conversations at their universities about what is going on in general. And in this particular situation with transfer, so just to kind of bring everybody up to speed who may not be aware, last year, the New Mexico Higher Education Department held a transfer summit. So it was held on March 30th of last year. It was called for by the Cabinet Secretary, Stephanie Rodriguez, and she asked that we put this summit together so that we can get a better handle on transfer in the state. So there was about 285 participants from 30 different institutions across the state that attended. It was primarily people in leadership, but there were some other folks there too. And what they really came together to come do was learn from some experts. So we had a couple talks from one from Mark Chisholm from NMHED, and then a talk from the CCRC, who came to talk about, national transfer data and, of course, data and how it compares to the transfer data in the state of New Mexico. We also got into breakout groups and discussed different transfer barriers that we were observing in each of our respective institutions. And then came together in a second breakout to discuss strategies to resolve those barriers that were identified. And out of this came some ideas for some action planning and movement towards sharing of best practices and making some movement toward improving transfer in New Mexico. So And within all that, there were 4 themes that were identified: collaboration between institutions, metrics and data sharing, student services and communication, and then policy practices and resource allocations. So if you're interested in reading the final report, it was written up by UNM and an NMSU representative. So Pamela Cheek here at UNM and David Smith at NMSU, they were on the planning committee and volunteered to write up the final report. So they took all the data that we had from the summit itself, and the reports posted here on the NMHED's website. So, if you're interested in reading it, just to kind of get a feel for how New Mexico's feeling about transfer, that's available. Let's see here. And the other piece that's good to know is that New Mexico was invited to a state policy transfer standards convening just about a month ago. And Stephanie Rodriguez, the cabinet secretary, she sent 6 representatives from New Mexico to go up. One from NMHED, one from CNM, one from Highlands, and then 3 here from UNM. And while we were there, we heard talks from the Gardner Institute, who had facilitated this self-study that 4 different states had done over the past 2 years, that was funded by the ECME foundations. And then, of course, we heard from the Aspen Institute just about, transfer practices. And really, the whole point of it was for us to learn, because since New Mexico wasn't part of that study, we were invited to go so that we can learn from them, from what they learned, as we start to plan for potential statewide policy on transfer. So next steps for that, we're going to be meeting up with Stephanie Rodriguez to kind of discuss what we learned, and some ideas that we have on how we could move over with a statewide policy for transfer. And, depending on how she wants to move forward with that, we'll determine what happens next. But, it could result in how the next New Mexico Higher Ed Transfer Summit is organized and scheduled, because it is happening this year. It just hasn't been scheduled yet. So, and then the other thing I wanted to put in here was just some resources. So if you haven't heard of it yet, there is something called NISTS. It's the National Institute for the Study of Transfer Students, and there is a wealth of information on there. So if you were interested in National Transfer Student Week and starting one up at your campus, there's information for that on there. They do hold conferences, a conference every year, and they have been doing a virtual and in person. And they have conference archives there. So if you're interested in listening to the presentations from at least the virtual, they're actually just posted on their website for the last 3 years. So, take a look. And there's a wealth of information. They have a library there on resources that are all transfer related. So books, articles, journal reviews. So, take a look. There's also a Transfer Nation Talks, it's just a podcast, and that's really great too. It's a good listen on the way into work. So, you can cast it to your radio. And then I just put a couple of journal articles that are really great, and then a couple of books that are also really great, all of which are on the NISTS website. So it's a little redundant I listed in here, but they're just really good. So